In 1984, Nissan aired a commercial for the 300ZX that didn't show a single traffic jam, no family, no cargo space, no safety rating, just a car, a road, and 30 seconds that made millions of Americans feel something they couldn't explain. That feeling sold more sports cars than any spec sheet ever could. Hey, this is Mark, and you're welcome to AUTOSAYS. If that already pulled you in, stay with me. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Here's the part nobody talks about. Nissan wasn't supposed to win the 1980s, not even close. When the decade opened, Japan was still fighting for credibility in America. The Z car had existed since 1969, but the late 70s had nearly killed it. Oil shocks, emissions restrictions, a market that suddenly wanted economy over everything. The original 240Z had been a genuine sports car, fast, beautiful, light. By the time the 1981 280ZX arrived, critics called it a grand tourer in disguise. Comfortable, quiet, bloated. A sports car that didn't want to be one anymore. Enthusiast magazines were polite about it, buyers were not. Sales were soft. And inside Nissan, there was a very real question forming. Does the Z even have a future? But here's where it gets strange. Instead of retreating, Nissan leaned in, hard. The decision was made to go in the opposite direction. The 300ZX, the Z31 internally, would be lighter, sharper, faster, turbocharged for the first time in the Z's history, and it would look unlike anything else on American roads. The design team settled on a silhouette that was almost aggressively futuristic. Flush glass, a long hood, a cockpit that felt less like a car and more like a fighter jet. It was a deliberate visual statement. This machine doesn't belong to the world you're living in. It belongs to the one coming next. And then, Nissan did something that, even now, doesn't get enough credit. They handed the marketing to people who understood that you don't sell a sports car with facts, you sell it with feeling. The 1984 commercial ran during prime time, 30 seconds, no voiceover explaining horsepower, no celebrity endorsement, no comparison to a competitor. What it showed was a 300ZX moving through a landscape that looked like the future itself. Sweeping curves, a driver who appeared completely at ease, a soundtrack that pulsed rather than announced. The tagline was simple, almost impossibly simple, but the combination of image and sound and movement hit something specific inside the viewer, something primal, something that said, I want to be where that car is. Now, you'd think Nissan's finance team might have been nervous about spending that kind of money on emotion instead of information. Someone in a boardroom almost certainly raised their hand, and almost certainly someone else in that room overruled them. That was the right call, because what happened next was not a modest sales bump. In its first model year, the 300ZX moved over 50,000 units in the United States alone. That was a number that made the competition uncomfortable. Chevrolet was watching, Porsche was watching, Ford, which had just revived the Mustang GT, was very much watching. The Z31 hadn't just returned the nameplate to relevance, it had reset the entire conversation about what an affordable sports car could be, and the commercial was a major reason why. This is the part where the history and the money collide. Sports cars in the early 1980s were in a complicated position. Insurance rates on performance vehicles had climbed sharply through the late 70s. The demographic that wanted them, young, aspirational, just entering the workforce, often couldn't afford the premiums. Nissan priced the 300ZX aggressively. The base model came in under $19,000. The turbocharged version was just above $21,000. For context, a comparable Porsche 944 was sitting at $26,000 and climbing. Nissan hadn't just made a desirable car, they had made a desirable car that a real person could actually buy. The commercial understood this. It never showed a price. It didn't need to. The price was the other part of the story, the part that closed the deal after the emotion had already opened the door. But there's a detail buried inside the making of that commercial that almost nobody knows. The original cut was longer, nearly 60 seconds. It told more of a story, a driver, a destination, something that resembled a narrative arc, and it tested well. Focus groups liked it, the agency liked it, and then someone, accounts differ on exactly who, made the call to cut it in half, strip it down. Trust the image, trust the car, trust the viewer to feel what they were supposed to feel without being told what to feel. That decision to cut was terrifying at the time. You've invested in production, in music, in a campaign built around a specific vision, and then you reduce it to half its length and hope the essence survives. In this case, it did more than survive. The compression made it more powerful. Every second that remained earned its place. There was nothing left to skip past. And when it aired, on a Tuesday night in the middle of a network drama between a detergent ad and a promo for the local news, it landed differently than anything else in the break. Viewers didn't just watch it, they stopped. That kind of attention is almost impossible to manufacture. When it happens, it's because the creative instinct and the product reality happen to be perfectly aligned. The 300ZX was genuinely fast, genuinely beautiful, genuinely different from what Americans had seen in a Japanese car before. The commercial didn't lie, it didn't exaggerate. It showed the car as it actually was, and trusted that to be enough. And it was. There's a financial ripple here that ran longer than most people realize. The Z31's success didn't just rescue the Z nameplate. It shifted how Nissan, and quietly how the entire Japanese automotive industry, thought about the American market. Until the early 80s, the dominant strategy was practicality, reliability, value. Honda and Toyota were winning on those terms and winning decisively. The Z31 opened a different lane. It said there is a buyer in America who doesn't want the most sensible choice. They want the most exciting one. And if you give them excitement they can afford, they will come to you. That insight echoed forward. It shaped the marketing of the R32 Skyline later in the decade, even though that car was never officially sold in America. The mythology preceded the legal import by years. It influenced how Mazda thought about the MX-5 Miata, which launched in 1989 and became one of the best-selling sports cars in history. It fed into the early planning conversations around what would eventually become the Supra, the Eclipse, the NSX. The commercial for the 300ZX wasn't just a commercial, it was a proof of concept, a demonstration that emotion, executed cleanly, is a product strategy. And here's the thread that still hasn't been fully resolved. When Nissan eventually discontinued the Z, and they did in 1996 after the Z32 generation had come and gone, the reasoning was cold and financial. The sports car market had contracted, SUVs were eating everything. The numbers didn't support keeping the line alive. The bean counters won that argument. And for 8 years, there was no Z. 8 years of silence from the nameplate that had once made Nissan relevant on American roads. When the 350Z arrived in 2003, it was a statement of something more than product planning. It was a recognition that the emotional capital built by cars like the Z31 and commercials like the one from 1984 had not expired. That there was still a buyer out there who remembered what the Z had felt like, not what it had measured, what it had felt like. Some things in this industry have a price, some things don't. The 30-second commercial that aired in 1984 cost a specific amount of money to produce and buy airtime for. That number is knowable. What it generated in return, the loyalty, the legend, the decades of aspiration that followed, is not. Here's what you should take from this. The most powerful marketing in automotive history has almost never been about the car. It's been about who the car lets you become. Nissan understood that in 1984. The question worth asking, the one I'd like you to think about, is whether any manufacturer today still understands it in the same way, not just as a slogan, but as a genuine product and creative philosophy. Drop your answer in the comments. I'm reading every one. And if you want to understand how another Japanese automaker used the same principle to create one of the most desirable illegal cars in American history, that story is next.